Welcome to another episode of the Lords of Consciousness video cast. I'm your host, Clint Culberson, and today we have a special guest. Her name is Bridget Nielsen, and you can find her on bridgetnielsen.com or just you go to her YouTube channel, and you're going to be in for many worlds of knowledge and information, and I hope you'll check it out, and you'll hear after today's interview why you should check it out, because Bridget is someone who is tapped in to a lot of different things. I mean, you're very well-rounded, Bridget, in terms of just your knowledge base of things on this planet and things not of this planet and things not even of this time period. So welcome, my friend.
Thanks so much, Clint. Thanks for having me.
I wanted to get right into well, I'll just share my experience. You know, I've been beyond fascinated with things that are not of this planet, and one of the things that I've really tapped into is, or just as I look into and explore this idea of contact, or like already people having contact with dimensions not that are here, or higher dimensional beings. I'm very open-minded to it, and I find that there's a lot of similarities between the experiences of contactees and of channelers, and you know, whatever you want to call it. And so that's kind of what's like led me down this path. And even though me personally, I haven't had, I've had experiences that were they're my own, I suppose, but I've never had reoccurring experiences. So there's a lot of people out there that might listen to your work and think, oh my gosh, what the heck's this girl talking about, you know? So my question really to you is, you know, someone who hasn't had an experience like this and hears you talking about galactic history, for example, and they think, what the heck, this chick's lost her mind, man. What do you say to that person, and how do you bridge the gap, that experiential gap or knowledge gap, or if you know what I'm saying?
Yeah, definitely. I think the first step is just letting their mind be blown, I guess.
Yeah.
Like just letting them be like, she's crazy. Just letting that happen.
Mm-hmm.
Like, it's kind of like this throwing up, or this projection, or this movement of their own fields.
Mm-hmm.
And I think when that happens, it moves, and then something can come in, like their own understanding can come in. Because I know that when this happens, that those people, it often like then just like something clicks. Mm-hmm. And it might be that night and they have like a dream about something, or it might be a few months later or a few years later. But it's very common that people will come up against resistance, and then something will shift in them. So I think just the fact that they're coming into contact with the information is significant in some way, because there's billions of people on Earth, and a lot of them aren't experiencing this kind of content. So I think if they just come into contact with it, there's significance in and of that. And I just let people have their own experience with it, because from the very beginning, it was crazy for me. Like, I was like, what the heck is happening to me? And I felt like it was different and out there. And so in my sharing of this, it was always strange to me, and that was always a part of the conversation. And it still is. It's like, what, this is happening? That's so interesting. So I think that makes it not as intense for me to come up against opposition, but for the most part, it sparks something. Like, people, when they're watching this or certain videos of mine, they just remember. And so that's really what I'm doing, and that's what other experiencers are doing, is just being like a catalyst spark, I think, in an energetic way to release those memories.
Yeah, so is it really not necessarily a message for everyone, but for a certain for certain people who are ready for it?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, there's different themes. Like, there's humans that are probably not going to partake in like the galactic theme of awakening. That's just not what they came here specifically to do. But a lot of people at this time are, because this is the next frontier of awareness and consciousness and remembrance.
Yeah, it's something that awakens inside of me. It's like this thing in the far back of the room that just says, just keep going. This might be scattering your brain cells right now, but just keep going and just, take it in, receive it. And the future shall unveil the past in many ways, and so you can actually see that right now in politics. Same thing, the future events they explain a lot, and so the same with this for me, at least. As I keep going further, I start seeing more puzzle pieces. Oh my gosh, I guess that person wasn't so crazy sounding before.
Exactly. It's like in context to time, which is ironic that like linear time actually helps explain nonlinear time and fragmentation. But really over like time and over these different pieces coming up, it makes sense. So right now it just is one piece. And I think just letting it be this kind of skewed piece that has no place to fit, just letting it sit there actually is helpful, and then being like, okay, well, something else is going to come along that'll make it click, and that's just kind of what happens.
Yeah. What do you say to someone who's really stuck in the left side of their mind, and who are data driven? How could you introduce this world to someone like that?
Well, for one, I'm like, that's fine. Like, if they don't want to explore it, then that's fine. So
but let's say they do. Let's say they have a general interest. They're not just closed-minded, but they're more analytically driven, if that makes sense.
Yeah. I mean, my big thing is taking people out of those brainwave states in a way. So it's whether that's in a session or whatever, but mostly like when, say, I'm taking people around sacred sites and like getting them back into like nature, getting them back into the feeling sense, getting them back into, the right brain, the flow, grounding, like those kinds of things just are recipe, like setting the stage for the mind to like calm down, to just be receptive to something new. So for me, it's kind of changing the body, the mind, the environment so that new things can come in. So working with the mind informationally, you're just playing with the mind. So I like to change the whole state to then enable like a whole new world.
Yeah. Well, it seems like the only way to even touch the doorstep of these other dimensions, you have to be expanding and, all in many, many ways. You have to be open up. So
yeah.
I wanted to ask you about this idea of hybrid children. This is something that you've really brought to the world in many ways, not just you alone, but you've been one of them who's been spearheading this concept. So true or false on my next statement? Help me out here, Bridget, because I'm a student here. So for higher dimensionals to make first contact with us, okay, I mean, this is the question. They are using hybrid children to be messengers, so we won't be freaked out when we finally meet them. Is there a true or false statement there?
I would say true.
Yeah. And so, can you kind of go into what this whole concept of hybrid children is? And I know you have given talks for hours on it, but give us the Cliff Notes.
Cliff Notes, yes. Cliff Notes would be that some kind of extraterrestrial contact is in the cards for us here in the next, like right now, through different like dream connections and remembering in those kind of ways, and then physical contact in the coming years. So it's just something that's coming. Now it's how do we handle that? Like, how can we even conceive of that? Because in most cases, we're like, oh, ETs are going to come, like, take over the world and kill us. Or there's all these different things that we have such locked in frameworks that it's hard to just let that move. So for me, in contact with, say, the hybrid children, and the hybrid children are a creation from us, really, from many experiencers and abductees, like on the ships, their eggs and sperms were taken to create children that were hybridized. To part of the agenda was to have them come back down to Earth to help with this contact thing, because if just a Pleiadian just like freaking beams down from a spaceship and is levitating towards you, that's going to be a lot harder to take in than like a kid. That's partly your genetics, that's like, hi, like I'm from there. So it's I think that that's one of the biggest things that I've seen is it makes the whole conversation much more digestible and fun. Like, can I say fun?
Sure.
Like, so
So are women giving birth to these children?
they are in some cases.
Okay.
For the most part, no, because there's so many, and that's kind of a lot to do is to like hold, for instance, like a woman for 9 months, like on a ship, to like fully go through that process. So for the most part, it's done where the insemination of the egg takes place for like 2 to 6 weeks or up to a few months on the ship. They might even be brought back to Earth with the egg inside of themselves, like pregnant, which there's tons of cases reported of that. And then brought back up to the ship, and then the baby is actually like born from a test tube, but there's still an energetic connection. But in some cases, there are mothers that have been reported that go full term, actually have the baby, and the baby is taken in the hospital and brought back up. And it's a whole thing. And there's lots of Barbara Lamb's done a good job in this work going with regressed moms like through this, and there's a lot of cases of it, which is really weird and sad, but it's strange because the moms aren't that sad about it, which makes me even more worried, because if your child died, you'd be freaking out. So there is something to it where the kid is actually still alive, they're just somewhere else.
Oh man, there's so many questions to ask about this.
Yeah.
So will these children live longer? I mean, and are they going to then be breeding with other human beings eventually, or how would this work? And do we
Yes,
know?
like the first will they be living longer? Yes. And then the second thing that came to me was no, because I mean the immunity of getting these kids, like I mean they created physical incarnating beings. That was kind of challenging. So
Mm-hmm.
it might not be perfected. So could they live longer? Yes, in certain environments, but maybe not like on Earth. But they, in some ways, the ones that do come would be breeding, say, like with well, not my kids, because I do have hybrid kids, so that would be weird. But with, like, say, if I was to have a kid, that generation would be, yeah, mixing with the hybrid kids. But the thing is it's not an external genetics that we don't already have inside of ourselves. The genetics from us are the ones that have been put into the hybrid kids, and some of the gray genetics we do have in us already. So it's not like it's some exterior force wanting to like interbreed, or like breed into like our species. It's still within their own species, it's just adjusted.
And are these children here on Earth now, or they're coming?
They're coming. So the kids being born now, as you know, like as we know, are just off the charts incredible. And very, very high in their remembrance and their frequencies and their genetics. So they're very close to the hybrid kids. But the difference that I keep on like seeing is environment. You know, it's going to be different if a kid's raised on Earth, going to like a school and this culture and like all that energetic fields influence versus a spaceship.
In regards to first contact, and I know I've read stories of this happening already, but higher dimensionals using basically the skin suit of a human, could that be another means of, bringing forth first contact in a way?
Totally. And that's what you and I are doing right now. I mean, we decided to come down, and we are higher dimensionals coming down in, like, I'm just in this body. And they're like, okay, well, they'll listen to this, right? They'll listen to you, and then we'll remind each other. And then the people listening are like, oh, wait, is that me too? And it's like, yeah, we all came down here, like incarnating from these other dimensions, to bring this remembrance, because we are like the seeds of the remembrance, that we're not necessarily from here.
Does that mean all souls come from another galactic system? Is Earth not old enough to have had its own, like, I don't know how to explain it, ancestral heritage in a sense?
Yeah, I mean, soul origins. There are souls that originate from Earth. And Steiner talks about this, and like the different inner earth beings actually like originated from earth. So there are ones that are just of earth origin. And because a lot of the extraterrestrial lineages are higher dimensional, different, which is a different soul expression. It doesn't mean it's better or worse or anything. It's just different. There are certain human souls that have just chosen to have earth experiences. So there are some that just have no idea, like that it's not even a thing for them understanding these like star connections. And then there's certain star seeds that come down here and they're like, I have no clue what this place is, and this feels really uncomfortable. So we're working with both at the same time, which will hopefully mix into, you know, contact on both ends.
What do you say to people who have that feeling of, oh, I don't belong here, I'm from somewhere else, but they are here? So, you know, it's like one of those logical things of accepting, I suppose, where you're at, but how do you overcome that, maybe that innate feeling you might have that, you know, you're from somewhere else?
Yeah. I don't give a lot of tolerance for that perspective because there's other people that do, so you can go hang out with those people. But I just, as you said, like, we're here. So as long as there's like this resistance to being here, then we can't do what we actually came here to do. And yeah, it's uncomfortable, but there's things that we can do to make it much more comfortable. We don't have to play in the game or like with certain energies that aren't us. So I think the sooner we step into like who we are and like grounded in here, the more that we can like establish a field and a framework of then how to create that makes us feel really comfortable.
Where do you think that most people get blocked in this journey of self-awareness to really truly know your purpose, as you've kind of described? Where do you think is like the biggest roadblock that people are up against, or maybe even right now in the collective? What's the is there a most common blockage that's going on right now?
Oh, that's a good one. Well, I would say cultural, ancestral energies. Like, of just, because the thing is even though we're starseeds, we came in with the lineage baggage and the lineage beauty of what came before us. So I think that there's a lot of that that can hold us into certain patterns. And if we can just become really conscious of it, we can move through it really quickly because we have that availability of awareness in us. So I think that those kinds of things, and then really our like matrix culture grind, because like even I'm seeing right now in like the consciousness movement that us, the people like on this quest for truth and on this quest for like consciousness, now have somehow got spun up into like becoming like getting views and like growing like followings and this strange thing, rather than being like, okay, what was the mission? Like we're kind of off track and have gotten like sucked into the spiral of like the matrix and social media and stuff. And I'm like, okay, this is a little bit whack. We've got to like back up and like figure out what we're actually trying to do. Are we trying to grow a following, or are we trying to change the world here? You know, so there's some of that. So I think getting caught up in those kinds of social cultural programs is probably the biggest thing right now.
That's really interesting. I mean, especially from, I suppose, both of our perspectives. We both have, you know, media sites that we're trying to bring a message to the world. And if, you can't but help sometimes get caught up into like the growth side of things. And you know, it's exciting when you start growing and you feel like your stage is getting a little bigger. And what are you going to do with that stage? And it's like this constant balancing act of, you know, like paying attention to what's happening in terms of the I don't know, the structural side of this media, and then also why the heck are we really doing this, you know, and ultimately that true purpose and keeping that as at the forefront of everything you do. Because I think I've noticed even within myself when my focus is on the other side, the work I do is not, it doesn't resonate with people nearly as much as when I'm just doing it from like that heart source. I'm sure you've experienced the same thing, correct?
Yeah, totally. It's a strange thing because we're like, okay, well, we want bigger platforms, and we want to share on a bigger stage because we're competing with like, Beyonce or something.
Right,
It's
right.
like, okay, we need like some, conversational leverage here. But then at the same time, we can get caught in like the ego spiral of that. So
Hmm.
I'm like seeing that and going, okay, is it more important for me to, like put out this new video and like do this thing to get the platform going, or is it more important for me to like go deep in and get like the new information, the new depth? And that's my internal process right now. I'm like, okay, it's time to go back in, and get some new treasures there to be able to share in a more authentic way.
Yeah, and I suppose that's always the pressure of media in a sense, is the constant. You must be constantly putting out content, or what your follower or the people on your page won't pay attention anymore, or whatever. But
Exactly.
like you said, the catch-22 is you have to go out and actually have life experiences and to have anything to really talk about.
Yeah,
And even just spending your time in books or on literature online or videos online and educating yourself without like real human experiences, I think you just like lose real solid ground under your feet. It's interesting.
totally. And I see that on the consumer side and like the content digesting side, of the
Hmm.
viewer side, where it's like you just want to keep digesting. And it's like, what about assimilation and
Yeah.
also getting your own information? So I see that as kind of, it's one of our greatest gifts right now is this communication. And yet at the same
Hmm.
time, it can be something that can hold us back.
Yeah. In fact, I'll spin that off into another question. Where do you see the purpose of technology in our future? I do sense that we're headed towards a more agrarian living, more smaller communities, tribal again. Like it's like that archaic revival that Terrence McKenna talked about. And so, in many ways, a lot of us are using technologies because we feel so alone in our physical world. So we're connecting with, well, heck, the only friend who thinks like me lives in Australia, for crying out loud. You know how it is.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
as there becomes more and more, these communities start, you find more of your tribe and even local areas. Where does the role of technology exist, especially when we're talking about like communication technology? Where will that balance fit within healthy communities?
Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, I think it's right now it's so much of a reflection tool. It's like, okay, we're talking right now and it's like this is just a reflection of what we can do with our own consciousness. So it's like we could have a telepathic conversation, and we could do it that way.
Mm-hmm.
Or we could, as technology comes out, say like virtual reality or some things like consciously lucid dreaming, so there's these different things where we actually can do them consciously,
Mm-hmm.
but we haven't gotten adept enough yet. So part of what I'm feeling is it's actually important to reach the level, almost as the technology comes out. So it's like whatever that technology is, see if we can do it with our internal consciousness.
Mm-hmm.
So I think really developing that rather than the crutch of technology, but letting the technology like be the carrot to be like, oh yeah, that's what I need to do, like as the reflection tool.
Mm-hmm.
So I see it as that. But I see it also as a way of really creating authenticity and accountability, like say cryptocurrency things coming out like smart contracts, where it's like you can say that this and then this equals we're going to do this, rather
Mm-hmm.
than people like changing what they say that they were going to do and like all this kind
Mm-hmm.
of like convoluted stuff. So I think the technology can also make things much more like clear and precise
Mm-hmm.
and authentic. So I think it can really change society in that way versus having things be all like strange and hidden and people not following through. So I think that's one of the big tools too.
Where do you feel like artificial intelligence and virtual reality are going to fit into this? Because it seems like it's going to be the new paradigm we're going to have to experience. And I'm sure, like everything, there does seem to be like a duality to it. And I know that as we go through this ascension process, it seems like we're trying to shed that. But does the physical or does the spiritual and mental health of humanity match the technologies that we have right now, that we're going to actually use it in a way that's productive and not like suicidal?
I know that's the tricky thing is it's like, well, whatever the technology, the consciousness of the technology is programmed with or directed towards is what it'll be. I mean, it's one of those things that virtual reality, it in some ways, especially for like, say, the starseeds we were talking about that just want to go home, it's a way of checking out, so I think it's asking us to be even more like resilient, like in our own centers and being like, this is what I choose. And the differentiation between what is virtual reality and what is this reality, like those lines can get pretty blurred to where you don't even remember what is the true reality. And it actually, is there a true reality? And as far as the AI part of it is, I mean, if it's programmed right or like led in the right direction for it to then like duplicate and continue the reflecting, I mean, it could scour the whole internet, scour everything about who we are and go, okay, let's make this better. Okay, oil companies, it seems like you've been destroying the world, so we're going to cut this off. And you know what I mean? So it could be something really good where it's like, that isn't working. Let's not cut down those forests. Let's use this thing that we saw on the internet, so it could end up being like a big brother, higher self being like, okay, let's get this back in order, kind of like a referee in this human game. So I'd see that it could be that, and it very well could not be that. So I think that so much of it is, it's like, where's the technology going to go? The technology is also determined by our timeline that we're generating from our own consciousness. So it's like, well, I'm not, say, creating AI right now, but I actually am creating AI right now and putting ourselves in that like responsibility seat to be like, no, we are actually determining which way this goes. Even just what we're putting out there right now, like on social media and the things that these information gatherers are gathering, we are a part of what it will then determine as the direction to go. So I think continuing to feel really empowered, actually, that each person's voice and each person's directive has a huge impact.
Yeah, it's really interesting that we can steer the bus in a different direction. And I wanted to ask you though on artificial intelligence and with the knowledge that you have of galactic history, really. Can you talk about the idea of the borg-mind and that there have been species that have gone maybe too far down a certain path and couldn't ever find their way back again? And do we run the risk of that with these kind of technologies?
Well, totally. I mean, the key is like, if there's ever a time where you put something outside of yourself, or you're like, I need this thing to get to that thing, that level of consciousness, that level of like accessing knowledge or whatever, then that means that you're not enough. And then it's coming from this place of fear instead of like infinity. And so it is this like quest of like, can we catch up? Because it's like, will we be behind if other people are getting chips to like see everything on the internet, like, and we're not getting that, then are we going to be behind? And the answer would probably be yes, unless we can start growing our accessibility to be able to do that with consciousness. So in a way, that's what I feel like it's going to. And yeah, it would get too far out of hand because you would so much. I mean, we can see it with just social media. It's not even like part of our interface within our own biological body yet, but just like this distance and us doing stuff here, it's hard. Most people are addicted to it. Like, we can't even get off of it. So if it's like interfaced into our own brain, like, how in the heck are you going to get out of that program, So I think extracting ourselves right now in this playing field of what we have and going, can I really, get outside of this technology and then accelerate my consciousness, and how's my relationship with that right now? That muscle will be building for when the next level comes, and we'll be like, okay, can I extract myself, and can I infuse whatever goodness into that at this next level?
Yeah, and every I suppose the older generation always struggles with new technology and the adaptation of it. I mean, My dad tells me a story about his great uncle who was a cowboy out in Texas of his whole life and never driven a car, only rode horses. And, this is like in the 50s. And the guy was like, I ain't ever driving those damn things. Those things are of the devil kind of thing. Yeah, we do seem to be afraid of that, of what new tech can bring us. So it's one of those things where I'm always like nervous that I'm being an old fuddy-duddy, or I wonder if we're on the cusp of some sort of new, like a new Amish type of philosophy coming where we just say like, from here, you know what, from 2015 on, I'm done with all the technologies. I ain't going into the quantum, or I ain't going into that, and I think there are probably going to be people that might do that. And at least initially, and maybe they're just going to wait and see if it's something that's safe for them. Like you said, can we take it on in a healthy way? We don't want to lose ourselves to it. And we try to villainize it so much, but it is a part of our experience here on Earth, don't you think? I mean, we came here knowing we are technological beings.
Totally. I think it's just balance. Like even like at like this highest level of like AI integration and stuff, it's like it's balance. And it's deciding like who we want to be as a human species. If it's like, okay, well, we could go too far and it could become this like collective hive mind, like technology interface, thing. And do we want to become that? Like, do we want to become like the Borg civilization? Do we want to? We could, and so I think it's going, okay, well, what makes us unique? What makes us special? And like our ability to have implosive genetics is a big part of that. And I think like returning to like this spaceship right here and like the technology we have in here is so extremely vast. And I think if the more that we focus on that, the externalization is where we get into trouble. So I think just continuing to develop this to then develop that is going to be like our safety net.
Yeah. Well said. Well said. I kind of wanted to switch gears on you because I wanted to make sure I get a couple of these questions in before our time's up. But I wanted to see if you could explain what this theory of the mandela-effect is, and what that there's so many videos online about it, so many evidences of it, and people think, oh, that's bullshit. I remember it this way, but is there something to it? And if so, what is it? Is it some sort of cosmic breadcrumb that we're supposed to be picking up here, or what?
I think it's absolutely real and happening. It's just becoming truly consciously aware that like there are multiple realities, multiple possible timelines, and they're converging and like they're like coming together and like, wait, two are coming together and like these overlays are happening where they were different. Like there were slight differences in this, and we're becoming aware of that. So part of it is just an expansion of our awareness that there are multiple realities, and through that deciding, what we're going to do with it. Because right now is this time, like as we're awakening and as like all possible realities are at our fingertips, it's like, well, what are we going to do? And so it's evidence showing that it actually is true. Whereas it could just be a concept. We could just be like, yeah, that's like a nice spiritual concept, but it's like, no, like the Mandela effect is like physical, kind of like the physical manifestation evidence that it is happening. And right now it's so important to realize that it is truly a principle, which again is like empowering of the direction that we're going to go as humanity.
Yeah, I do. I think my gut tells me, when you consider all the evidences of it, usually there's something real trivial, like a movie, or who ultimately cares, right? Whether the Berenstain Bears are spelled this way or that way. But it is, to me, some sort of just an evidence of something else, like you said, like that there could be other dimensions that we're either bumping into on some level. I'm sure it's way more complicated than that, but just to kind of like visualize it in my mind. And it does seem like there is something. My gut tells me there's something to it in regards to that. I mean, who can even say? How can we say who's right or wrong? I mean, what if some of us really do remember it, being, no, I am your father, and the others really do remember it as, Luke, I am your father. I don't know.
Totally. I mean, it's kind of like through the trivial that that there's some kind, it's like a cultural landing point, you know, even though they're trivial, it's something that isn't just your own segmentation of a certain thing that you're into. It's more so like a cultural reflection. So even though it's trivial, there's something potent, even more potent in it.
Well, I mean, I already know the answer to this from you, given the videos that you've made. But isn't that really what Star Wars is? It's like in many ways this like collective mirror of what's going on, and who the hell knows? Maybe it is some real history of something we've already experienced or something we are headed towards. I'm not sure, but I swear every time I watch one, I feel like it's some psychedelic trip. Like whoa, man! And you know, speak to that because you've made some great videos about these connections with Star Wars and our existing reality.
Yeah, I mean, the thing is the reason why there's such a cultural popularity and like, you know, that feeling where you're like, oh, what is this? It's because we know that it's true on some level. Like so for the most part, the Star Wars story we played out in the stars, like in Orion, like, and the thing is that's one of the energies that we're continuing to play out on Earth right now. And so it's still like a relevant story, because if we weren't playing it out anymore, we'd be like, what are they still talking about? Like, that's dumb, but we're still in the middle of it. And so that's why it has this like juice, right, to it, is because we're still figuring out, do we want to keep on playing it? And we're asking that question. And the answer is yes, if the movies are still coming out. But it's definitely a really important reflection to look back to and to tune into and to go, okay, what was really happening there? And do we want to keep on experiencing this or not?
So where do you see us on this Ascension timeline? From your perspective, of course, we're just talking your perspective. I mean, there's a whole lot of people we're talking about. Can you kind of give us your perspective on where we're at on that timeline?
I mean, I think that everything's going actually quite well, even though it seems like it isn't, because it's like this human cultural detox, where everything's like up, you know, with like the presidency and all these different countries and currency and like things coming out. And so all of this eruption of realness is like really up, and we have to be able to address like the darkest shadows of our collective to even be able to integrate into this next stage. Like, it's not just about the love and light. It's like, okay, the deep undercurrent of all of humanity is very much so up, and most people, you know, are becoming aware of it. They're like, okay, there is this like Pizzagate, you know, child, you know, stuff going on. There is this Trump thing. Okay, the Southern California fires do seem pretty weird. Like, there's, you know, it's becoming like a very common cultural thing. I mean, even when I was doing interviews with people in cities on the streets about like extraterrestrials and what they believe, everyone I talked to, just normal people, were like, yeah, the government's hiding stuff. Yeah, like they do, you know, ETs do exist. Because it's becoming like a very commonplace thing. It's not like this like shock factor where it's like, no, it's like, you're going to shatter my paradigm. It's like people are like, okay, yeah, this thing is. So I think on like a very mainstream level, like things are shifting in that way. I feel ourselves at this point where we're going to really have to start choosing. I mean, what content we're ingesting, and like I said, getting off of the technology to participate in the world and start implementing true solutions rather than just talking about it. So I can see this moment right now where it's like, are we just going to like spin in this matrix of, because a lot of us think of the matrix, you know, as, okay, like the jobs and the grind and these things, but we're like, we're not in the matrix when we're talking about this other stuff on Facebook. And it's like, yeah, but you kind of still are. We're still entrenched in it. So I'm seeing a real breakaway needing to happen, and this kind of renaissance you were talking about of getting back to Earth and really going deep into our consciousness. So I think that it's going really well, and everything, all the dark shit's coming up, and that's really good. But now it's like, okay, what are we going to do with it? Are we going to just keep on being excited to like sit in it and like talk about it some more? Or are we going to really shift it, create solutions, and implement? So,
you know, I've heard you talk about how we are a species preparing to leave for the stars, in a sense, you know, and Terence McKenna, again, had some great quotes about that same concept. You know, the way you see it, do you see it as something that is we are about to finally be a part of our galactic community, or is this something that potentially we could be leaving this planet altogether?
I was just watching Interstellar with my boyfriend the other night, and like the whole movie's pretty much like
that.
Earth's destroyed. Like, let's go move. And I'm like, that is so weak. I'm like, oh, the soil's bad. I'm like, what the heck? Like, no, that's not how it works. Like, we can heal this planet. Like, that's not actually that hard if we had the resources and like we chose to do it. It's not going to be that rough. We know what to do. And so I would say, no, this is our home, and like letting it be that. And I think actually having that mindset of being, this is our home, and making sure to keep it nice. If we really had that concept around it, then I think that things would change. Whereas like most of the people, it's like, okay, the elites are like, nope, we're going to destroy the surface and go underground, or we're like figuring out things on Mars, or whatever that whole thing is. It's like, no, just let's clean up our mess and let's partake in this. So I definitely see travel, and I definitely see exploration, you know, as a part of where we're going. But when the explorer comes home, you know, and I don't think like going and needing to go to somewhere else is necessarily the solution. I think that we need to clean up our mess, or else we're just going to create it somewhere else.
Well said. That's some wisdom right there. Yeah, it's no doubt. But what do you see then as our greatest benefit from connecting with our galactic community? What awaits us?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's this part of like, they're a form, like I was saying, how the AI is kind of like a big brother could be a big brother being like, hey, what are you doing? I think that the ET thing can be that too, where it's like, well, what are you doing over here? Like, but in reflection, like in an emanation of who they are, like from this higher place of integration. Not that they're all perfect by any means, but like depending on which race and like how they're showing up, I think it could be, and that's why we can't make contact with them right now, is because like all of our ego shit, all of the things that we haven't integrated would be completely instantly revealed to us, and we can't see all that quite yet because it's still crazy. And so I think part of it is just a reflection, a field understanding of who we can truly be. So it's just that resonance of like, oh yeah, that's who I am, like that's who I can be. So I think it's just partly just being like, oh yeah, that's how we can interact as a species and stuff. So I think that download is critical, because that's the thing that we're working with. We're working with all this wounding from other galactic times and all the crap we've done on Earth. And so we don't know what fields, we don't know what to tap into of who to be. And so we're waiting for that reflection, and the reflection's right here. We can go in and find it, but also that external reflection, say from the extraterrestrials, would be helpful. So I think there's technology, of course, that would be helpful. But really, if anything, it's just that consciousness ignition that they can show us, remind us of.
Yeah, and I mean, it always seems to be if we are vessels in a way. I mean, is your cup big enough to receive it? And you can make your cup bigger. I mean, it's a fluctuating cup. You can retract and expand. And it does seem that we are all preparing ourselves for greater information, for greater knowledge, wherever the source may be. And maybe, who knows how it'll all go down, but I do get the sense that our galactic community is waiting for us to get to a point where they can give us some cliff notes. But you know, a lot of people will say there's a mind psy-up in that thinking, because again, we're looking for some sort of externality to give us this. I guess my question to you is, how do we keep that balance of course, the priority of looking within, but then not being open to the possibility of something external to us happening? I mean, it seems like you can almost like go so, so much about, it's all about the inside that, and nothing's going to come for us. It's like people think right now, there's no way Trump could be aiding, like, good military to kick these guys out of office. And I get why they think that, especially when you go see the world of the political scene of the last, thousands of years. Anyone who's ever tried to do anything gets. So could Trump be different? And a lot of people, I totally get their pessimism, but can we close off to something that we should potentially be open to? And I'm not saying we shall become Trump fans, but I'm just saying, can we be open to actually something external to us happening?
That's a great question. And I think that we're being called to hold multiple perspectives that aren't closed loops at the same time, where it's like, can this be true? Because it's good to be like, okay, bring reality to it and bring, I guess, some history of being like, okay, this is kind of what's happened in the past. I don't want to be naive because there's been so much naivety, but then overcompensating for it, we close all the doors of like what's possible. So, I mean, the like relationships 101 kind of being open, but no expectations, like not being needy for something, but being receptive to receiving. I think that just even that is huge, and depending on like, and open to all the different categories, and being open to receive, definitely, of like what is possible and what is there. And pessimism is not going to help anything. We have to staying positive is really the only solution that we have.
Yeah. And it's as much as meditating on a rock will help my world, right? I mean, of course. And I am a firm believer of that the kingdom lies within. But my meditation is not going to replant the redwood forest, and so it's one of those things where I've even interviewed someone who is a part of rehabilitating that forest, and he's a nonprofit based on donations. And again, at this pace of just trickling in donations, I mean, it's wonderful what he's doing, but like you had mentioned, it's a matter of just resources. And again, when you consider how abundant this planet is, and you realize that we have all the solutions already. I mean, you've said many times, like, we can rehabilitate the soil. It's not that we don't know how. It's not like these problems we have. It's just we're stuck with our thumbs in our mouths, like, I don't know. We have them, but it's just literally a matter of changing the trajectory of where we focus our resources, instead of this military war industrial complex where pretty much half of everything we generate in the United States goes towards this whole big scam. And you start going, well, geez, if we could somehow change it, and of course, people have been saying this for a long time, but why can't we change it? I mean, because honestly, our Earth is now telling us how unhappy she is with us. Everyone's feeling it. Everyone's feeling the stress of that. So how do we take the reins over before the madman drives the bus over the cliff?
Yeah. Well, I think first and foremost, and putting into play whether we can fully act on it right this second of whatever that solution is, at least getting all the solutions ready. It's like, okay, when this billionaire decides, or when this person decides to like invest in this, okay, here's my plan. It's ready.
Yeah,
like
well
everything's ready to go. And that readiness might take a year or two, like to truly be like, okay, here it is. Now it just needs the funding. But if it truly is there, it will get the funding, like something will happen. And I even see this, New York City is like suing the oil companies for global warming. And I'm like, that's great. But have you come up with the solution of what they're going to repay to? Like, are they going to repay to put in a whole solar grid across the United States? Like, what are you wanting out of this? Like, there's the redemption, but then what's the solution? So I think really focusing on the solutions, because we've been so pessimistic for so long of like, it's all not working. And it's like, okay, what are the solutions? Get them ready, and then like act on it.
Yeah, I totally agree. And it goes back to that idea of, your cup better be ready for it. I mean, if we say we want the knowledge, but you're not doing anything to be able to receive it. I mean, we all say, "Oh, I'd love to have $1 million." What would you do with it? What would you even do with it? Even if you have a great idea, I want to, go feed the homeless people. If I could only, but I can't do it because I don't have money. All right, here's $1 million. What are you going to do? What are you going to buy with it? What is your kitchen going to look like? How many trucks are you going to have to deliver food back and forth? I mean, and I think you do. The power of manifestation is truly seeing every detail. Even, Walt Disney saw every last detail of Disney World, and he got turned down by 140 bankers or something like that to get his loan. And he kept at it, but because he saw the vision so clearly, like you said, and then bam, he was ready to receive the lot of money that he got. So.
Exactly. And it can start small. I mean, even like right now, say like on Hawaii, I'm like, okay, well, me personally, I want to be completely sovereign, be completely off the grid. Well, I am off the grid actually here living in Hawaii, and we're on solar and stuff. Nice. But I'm like, we want to, like, my friends and I want to have all the different fruit trees and like trees possible to make Hawaii completely not needing the mainland for anything. So what can we do? Well, we're sprouting pecan trees, and it's like,
nice.
They have land. So we can just sprout all these trees and get them ready. And even for me, it's like, I don't have land right now, but I can start getting the trees ready. And if I get the trees ready, then I'll need land, so it's one of those things of just getting it going, right?
That's exactly what we're doing at our house. We have we rent a property in my family, and we have because as we rent, I'm not going to invest a bunch of money too much into planting, but I've been growing my own trees in containers in a greenhouse, and the land will get there. So it'll come. Jah provides, baby.
Exactly. But you have to get the trees ready, or else when you do supposedly get the land, then you're going to be get it ready. So
yeah, exactly. Where do you see you taking your work going forward? Where do you feel like your gifts can be best received right now?
That's a good question. And the answer is, I don't know. The answer is no, honestly, I'm going through this deep internal process actually over the past few weeks of feeling like too much of my energy has been moving outward with sharing, and I need to go in and there's some massive downloads to get directed of my next action, because I want to take action, but it's like there's something coming, so I have to I think I'm going to actually take the next few weeks and maybe not even post.
I love it.
See what happens. So I'm not quite sure. I'm going to go into my inner space and see what's there.
Well, there you have it, folks. This is your last you're going to hear from Bridget for a while. So you better watch this video. The last we're going to get of her for a minute.
Exactly.
Well, good for you. That's good for you to see that. I've been experiencing a very similar process of going in and out. Do I focus my energy on just planting trees? Like you said, we've gotten very heavily into permaculture and food forests. Sounds like you're into it too. Soil rehabilitation, the whole deal. And then but then you think, well, maybe that's all that's important is just planting trees instead of who cares whether people know about the Illuminati or not. But then I do come back to, I've had this, since December, I've had this huge, I don't know, fire burning inside me because of the events that are happening in the world. It's almost like, and I almost feel like an importance to man my battle station in a way, because as this stuff comes down, I do think that if with citizen journalism, that enough voices are giving a maybe an alternative perspective than what the mainstream media is telling us, that we can potentially quell some of the stress, and then also hopefully people can see this as a positive, that from the ashes of an old dying paradigm, something way more beautiful will grow from it.
Absolutely, I agree, and I do totally feel the man your station thing, because the more that especially the conscious community or just anyone that'll listen to this kind of information can stay stable, can stay emotionally, energetically stable during this times, it actually in physics will stabilize the planet. So it actually makes a huge difference. And with that said, so I'm I'm not going to leave forever by any means. I got to man my station, but I need to go burrow in and see if there's some things that I can adjust. So I am in that interplay where it's like, no, disappearing doesn't do anything, but just sitting there all day in the grind of whatever this mechanism of social media doesn't work either. So I'm like making sure to create balance.
Yeah, and there's always like that part of me that thinks if I go hunker down, hibernate, that I'll never come back out. Like, and there's like a part of you that thinks, well, shoot, I don't want that either. And I don't know why I even go through these like silly like mind games of thinking. You know, it's like if you go through a real bad time, there's like a part of you that's feels like, well, the storm will just be here for the rest of my life, and totally. And that's it. And it's like, come on, man, it's always in and out, in and out. It's a breath, you know, and you know,
like you said, the fire, like we came here with the fire, and like the fire's not, it's going to start burning it again, and we're going to have no choice but to like come back out and share. So I think that's already like set up in us.
Yeah. Bridget, the last thing I'm going to ask you, and we'll end on this. There's a lot of people out there that are struggling and who are in the storm and feel like it'll never end. And so much so that, you know, some people don't want to be here anymore. And we're seeing record amounts of, at least the statistics are proving that, and the addictions that people have are taking them from this planet. Talk to those people right now, if you wouldn't mind, to just leave with words of what would you say to that person if they're listening, even if there's one person right now who has a real existential crisis going on, what would you say to them?
There is something on this planet that you came to do, like straight up, like there's a reason you're here, and like it is significant, or else you would not be here. So like that in and of itself, there is a reason. And it can be completely tumultuous. And it probably, if it is more tumultuous for you, then that means you're more sensitive. You have more capacities to then direct that to help. So that there's even more in there, empathy and whatever feelings that you have to really assist humanity. And in that space, giving yourself in some way, some kind of break or like refuge from the storm, because it's something that is being created to be this way and to feel this way. And in a way, because it feels out of control sometimes, but it's actually very strategically being done. And so I think when it's like, oh, it's being done, I'm not just in the middle of this mess. It's actually like imposed, you know, in a certain way. It's like, okay, well then how can I get out of that? Like looking at it objectively and going, okay, what are some things to my field, to the collective I'm in, to my energetics that can give me a break, like a breather, so I can refuel, come back into my center to come back in and figure out how I'm supposed to be here and to provide. So for me, that's always going back to nature and like really sinking into those natural vibrations and natural pacings, and getting out of the cities and getting out of those collective mind grids will instantly bring some kind of relaxation and rehabilitation of the energy, so that you can balance to come back in and know you have something to do.
Beautiful. Yeah, beautiful. That really is incredible advice. I've experienced it in my own life. When I was working in the corporate world, every weekend I'd hit up to the mountains, and it gave me that space to like just see my life and not get too not attach too much to the worries that I have. And totally. When you're in the middle of a forest, your credit score don't mean nothing. So and whatever that is, and that I just use credit score as an example, but there's a million examples of just irrelevant things that we're so worried about. Bridget, I just want you to know you're a sister in purpose, and I really appreciate you for coming on. I hope we can do it again sometime.
Oh, thank you, Clint. Thank you for everything that you guys are doing.